Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Sperging Out Podcast. My name is Mitch Grace, and I am the author of the book Growing Up with Asperger's Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom. It is on Amazon right now, and the audiobook version is right around the corner. We're almost done with it. And as always, I'm joined here by my co host extraordinaire.
Hey, I'm co-host extraordinaire. I am an autism therapist, so I work with individuals with autism, primarily adults and teenagers, and I do in-home therapy, so I'm a well of knowledge.
Excellent, excellent. Happy to have you here as always. Thank you for being here. And we are going to get into a more technical subject today, and that is how to interact with autistic people to a point where it won't frustrate you or the autistic person that you're communicating with. So, co-host extraordinaire, what have you noticed in your travels and your work
My
that were
tenure.
yes, your tenure? What have you noticed what are some clear miscommunication problems that parents and autistic people have, or children or adults have that what are
The-
some that jump out to you?
So the two big ones I see, and they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
One is assuming the individual with autism is intellectually disabled. So they talk down to them, they treat them like they're special needs in an intellectual level. Having autism does not make you less smart than the people around you, does not make you dumb. Just means you don't pick up on social cues and things that are more implicit in society. So someone with autism generally needs more explicit instruction on how to do something. So a lot of us learn how to do basic things just vicariously through seeing other people do it or just picking it up in the environment around us. A lot of people with autism need it explained to them, step by step, explicitly. That does not make them dumb, though. They know how to read, they know how to write, they know how to do everything you and I could do for the most part. Depends on the individual, of course. But I've seen many parents and teachers and even other therapists talk down to them. And if you talk down to someone, they're not going to listen to you. Even someone with autism, if you talk down to them like they're dumb, they're just going to start dismissing everything you're saying because you're hurting their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to just try to be non-judgmental while you explain stuff and try to explain explicitly. Like if you're teaching someone how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that's a common example used in psychology. What are the steps to making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? You don't just say, oh, make one. You go, okay, take the peanut butter out of the drawer, open the peanut butter, take the jelly out of the fridge, open the jelly, find a butter knife, put the jelly in the butter knife, get a slice of bread, put it on the bread, put the pieces of bread together. That's the level you have to get to with some tasks, where you have to really explain it in details that you don't really think about when you do it, but need explicit instruction. So the trick is to explain that without being rude. The other end of the spectrum is the exact opposite, where someone is so not understanding of autism that they just get frustrated. They're like, why don't you already understand this? I've explained it. It's so obvious. This is so easy, yada, yada. And then they get uppity and rude and, again, hurt the person's feelings. And if you hurt someone's feelings, they're not going to take instruction well. That's just how it works.
Yeah, I can attest to the having things explained to you on a personal level because at several points. Okay, so I'll give you a perfect example. When I worked at a sports bar in the downtown area, I was instructed because I worked behind the bar. I was a bar back. I was an assistant, and so at one point during my training, I was told, "Okay, bring me juice bottles." So like orange juice, lime juice, lemon juice, and whatnot to pour into the drinks to make the cocktails and whatnot. And I said, "Okay, how is that done?" And the person who trained me got pretty frustrated, and she flat out said to me, because I thought we had giant containers in the freezer of juice. So I thought, oh, are the plastic bottles somewhere behind the bar? Do I put them there? Do I make them there? So when she was bringing me to the freezer, and I said, okay, where are the bottles? And I asked a few other questions, and then she just got frustrated with me and she said the word honey. She said, honey. I forget exactly what she said afterwards, but she was acting like she was that. She was like, how do you not know this? How do you not know this? Even though I had no bar backing experience, I have no service industry experience at this point. This was all brand spanking new. And so I was like, I eventually had to learn through the other bar backs. It's like, yeah, no, bottles are here. You get the juice, you pour them in here, you put them here inside the bar and whatnot. and they need to be replenished ever so often and whatnot. And here's when we have to wash them afterwards. That one, that's a bit of a unique situation because I got to learn like on my feet with my hands. It wasn't like I mean, it's kind of a manual labor job, but like I got to do it within action. It's a bit different. I don't know if you can attest to this, co-host extraordinaire, but like doing things with your hands or working with your hands is a bit different than just typing it into a spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, in my experience, also my clients doing something firsthand, like being shown step by step how to do something, shown or explained, is harder than just doing it.
Uh,
So I'm trying to teach my client how to tie their shoes, and I show them how to tie the shoe. I explain how to tie the shoe. They still can't tie the shoe. So eventually, I do hand over hand, where I hold their hands and go through the motions and make them tie their own shoe, and now they can tie their shoe every single time. And it only takes the one time of like doing it and being like, oh, this is how it's done. So if that's what you're going for,
yes,
because
it's
yeah, doing things on the computer is like, I don't know how to describe it, not diegetic. Maybe that's not the right phrase, but there's a disconnect. You're
yes.
indirectly doing things on a computer.
Yes, like you're typing things into a keyboard in order for something to pull up, and you're also clicking and dragging and
Yeah,
whatnot. Whereas opposed to, I am picking up this bottle, I am putting it down here, I'm taking the juice, I am pouring it into the bottle, I am putting the cap on, I'm giving it to the bartender. The bartender is squeezing it out of my face, stuff like that.
yeah.
So
I mean, it comes into like UX design too for like digital interfaces.
right.
My clients actually, a lot of my clients either excel at digital interfaces where their brain just perfectly understands all the complex menus and systems and buttons and how to do everything, even stuff I don't understand, like on a phone.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in real life they struggle, or it's the opposite, where in real life they struggle, but then on digital devices it's even more confusing because it's not. There's no level of sense. The design of the user interface is arbitrary, which makes it much harder to learn. I have a client who uses an AAC, a talker device. So it's a device with a series of folders and buttons that say words for him. And it's got to be thousands of buttons in this thing, all in different subsections and folders. So I'll take the device and be like, okay, where do I find fold laundry? And I'll go through it for like a minute and not be able to find fold laundry. I'll hand it to him and he'll find it instantly.
Mm.
And it's just like, people with autism spectrum disorder have different ways of thinking, and it makes it easier for them to remember certain things. Like rote memory tends to be better in people with autism. Not always, but it tends to be. So he's probably memorized every folder, every button, every pathway on that talking device because he uses it to talk all the time. Whereas learning to tie shoes is very difficult because he's probably done it twice.
Right. Right. So when you're so this we've talked about like workplace stuff, for example.
Mm-hmm.
What about education stuff? Like what about teachers and whatnot?
That's a tough one. So the main issue that teachers face is that they're not teaching a single person. When you're
Yeah.
a therapist or an employer and you're training an individual, that's one thing. But when you're a teacher and you have 20 kids in a room, they're
Mm-hmm.
all special needs and all different levels of special needs, or even worse, where some of them are special needs and some of them aren't. It's a
Mm-hmm.
mixed population. That becomes very difficult because then you still need that one-on-one time to teach the person with autism or whatever special need they have, in a way that helps them, but you can't spend all your time doing that or all the other kids don't get their education.
Yeah.
So it becomes this issue where I've seen this in many schools where either they teach the whole classroom normally and then each individual student can come up to them after class or at the very end of class and get direct instruction. And that's the best way I've seen to do it. And for those teachers, that's really what you got to do. You got to spend a little extra time in your every class day to help give direct instruction to the students that need that help.
Hmm.
And the same thing applies before, obviously. Don't talk down to your students. Don't
Yes.
act like they're dumb for not knowing something. Like, I mean, I never understood that line of reasoning. If someone doesn't know how to do something, they don't know how to do it, and they're not going to know how to do it until someone tells them how to do it.
Yeah. And don't.
The information won't magically appear.
Yeah. And then the teachers don't. Don't. I'm not gonna say don't make fun of them, but like don't be purposely mean. Like for example, I have terrible handwriting. I'm not sure if that's exclusively an autistic thing, but
Mine's terrible too.
well,
A
okay, so it's not unique to
lot of
autism.
people have really bad handwriting.
Well, fair enough then. But point being is that my handwriting is very terrible, and I distinctly remember in my very first semester of high school, my freshman biology teacher, she was walking through everybody, handing out graded papers to people, and she and she gave me my paper and said, "Your penmanship is something, something, something." And I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "Your handwriting sucks." The entire class laughed at me. So
Wow. Yeah,
yeah, I felt singled out.
I
So
I can totally see how that would be hurtful,
yeah,
honestly. And that's the thing, actually, I guess I should mention that it's not even just for individuals with autism or any special needs, just students in general at school. Teachers, at least I remember in high school, teachers love to single out a student for answering a question that they know they didn't know or they knew they weren't paying attention as a weird motivator. It's like, I'm going to embarrass you. So the fear of being embarrassed will make you pay more attention in class or do better or study more. That does not work. That just makes that student hate you and hate your class and hate the thing you're teaching.
so
Don't do that. They don't ever single anyone out and use their peers as a motivator to embarrass them into working harder. It's
so
simply not a good strategy.
so what's the solution then?
Well, the solution is just talk to them individually. I mean, if a student is not paying attention in class, allow them to not pay attention. And then when they need help on their quiz, be like, were you paying attention? But don't use their peers or the whole group to embarrass them. Don't push that social pressure on them, especially someone with special needs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they have autism. I mean, I can't imagine they're not going to really fully understand why they're being made fun of, and then you're going to make them more aware of their differences to their peers, which
Yeah.
makes them feel really insecure and makes them feel really bad, just like anyone else would.
Yeah, and then such a formative time in their life too, like just the whole educational process. I mean, college just isn't a problem. Was it a problem for you? Did you notice that at all?
College?
Yeah.
No, I did pretty well in college. I mean, with my clients, some of them the ones that have gone to college do struggle with college, but mostly on like an educational level. It's
Mm-hmm.
just hard, which a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But personally, no. I think college works a little better actually because the professor is almost disconnected from the student body, where it's like the professor doesn't care if you're paying attention in class. They will not call you out. They will not bug you. They will just let you not pay attention and do poorly in their class, and you have to put in the effort to reach out and get help,
Yeah.
which is difficult for some of my clients. They don't want to reach out and get help. But most colleges and all of the clients I have that have gone to college are in special needs programs where they make a weekly meetup with their counselor,
Okay.
and their counselor makes sure they're doing well. And if they need to talk to their professor, the counselor makes them talk to the professor. So a lot of colleges have these built-in systems to prevent people with special needs from falling behind because they're afraid to talk to the professor or don't have that initiative or drive.
I wanna focus in on the being afraid to talk to a professor if they need help. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's just two different things. It's one, I mean, I feel like we all kind of feel that way in college. Like,
It is
college is one of
intimidating.
those experiences where it's like I've been taken out of my comfort zone and put into a building or an area filled with people I probably don't know,
Mm-hmm.
trying to prove myself to everyone, also try to figure out who I am or what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's a lot of nerve wracking anxiety, and it's the age in which you feel anxiety the worst, really. So, that all coupled together, plus just being lazy, like some people just don't feel like talking to the professor if they're not doing well in class. It's more effort. If you're not putting in the effort to study, you're probably not going to put in the effort to talk to your professor to get better grades.
Yeah, that's true. That was my attitude towards math classes. Like I flunked two math classes purely because I was like, this is like, and I didn't. I was late. I was very lazy, and I didn't seek help. I didn't seek guidance. And so when I was flunked, I was like, well, I'm not surprised.
I remember.
All
Oh, good.
and then when I was, it got to the point where I started the college where I met you. Eventually, um, I had to take a math class, and I think it wasn't remedial math, but it was like, hey, you need to take a math class in order to graduate, and this is the class you're going to take. So I'm
Oh,
like,
okay.
all right. So then I buckled down, and I didn't get an A or anything, but I passed, and so it was um like that was the effort when I actually buckled down. I was like, all right, I have to study, I have to pay attention, I have to go to Turnitin if I need it, and I can't remember if I did or not, but I passed the class, so it was fine. But yeah, it's I if I could go back and do it again, I would not wait until that class.
Yeah.
Like because when my back was against the wall and I had zero choice, I would have taken. Well, I'm not sure if I would have passed the first math class I took at where I met you,
Hmm.
but I definitely would have tried harder.
Yeah. I
100% would have tried
I
harder.
had two similar experiences. I took pre-calculus, which
Hmm.
I did multivariate calculus in high school. So once you do high level calculus, going back to pre-cal is like getting like your brain removed, because it's like, hey, you know all those easy shortcuts you learned in calculus, all those formulas and ways of doing this, like deriving, integrating, all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can't do that. You got to do it the long and hard way.
Oh, good lord.
And my professor was not chill. My professor was like, hey, you got the right answer, but you did it the wrong way, so it's a 0. And I'd be like, okay, I used calculus. This is the step before calculus. I have advanced past this course. You are making me take it. I don't want to remember sine, cosine, tangent. I'd rather just derive it and get the exact answer the first time.
Wow.
And so I ended up struggling. I barely passed the class with a C, but I hated that class because of that. And the second time was chemistry, because I just am bad at chemistry.
Mm.
And I failed the class the first time, and then I took it again, and I went to the review sessions of the exam and found out a secret magic trick the college did. They give you the final exam during the review, the exact exam, in the same order, and they tell you the answers.
I should clarify for those at home that is very heavily dependent on the class.
Yes, that is dependent on the class. That is different. But imagine my shock when I sit down and I'm given the final, and they're like, this will be what you'll be testing on tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and memorize the answers. I know exactly what to study. And so I made 100 the second time on the final, whereas the first time I failed it. And all it took was me going to that review session. So if I could go back in time, I would definitely have taken the review session the first time.
Right. It's interesting because my experience with review sessions was just it was two things. It was either the TA saying, "Okay, what do you have questions on? I'm going to give you the general subjects of what is going to be on the exam, but I can't give you specifics."
Oh,
and
wow.
then we get to ask specifics, and then the TA can be like, "Well, if I had to guess, I think the professor's going to phrase it like this, or I think this question is going to be multiple choice, or this one's going to be fill in the blank, or this one is going to be flat out an essay." And then the other half, the other times I got it, which was where it was still the TA, but the TA was like, "All right, a question like this is going to be on the exam. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to be something like this. Or this question is going to be in the ballpark of what's going to ask. Or, hey, the professor did say in this class that she is going to ask you this exact question. She made it a
Okay,
point.
yeah.
So just a reminder."
So it's like a good reminder of like what questions you should be studying for and thinking about and ready for in the exam.
Yeah, like it's like the TA never said, okay, 2 plus 2 is going to be on the exam. It was more like
That's probably the way they should do it, and not literally giving you the final exam. It felt like cheating when I got that class.
yeah.
Great, but I'll take it because I'm really bad at chemistry.
So I want to focus on. I want to
Yeah.
circle back to being afraid to talk to the professor because
Oh, yes.
I want to talk about the benefits of talking to the professor.
Massive.
Yes.
More so than just your grade in school.
Yes.
Like, you don't.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't really think of this when they're in college, but talking to your professor puts your name out there and gets you recommendation letters
Yes, it
for
does.
things after college,
Ooh, yes, it
higher
does.
master's degrees, research programs if you go in for a master's or PhD.
Mm-hmm.
Your professor knowing who you are, especially in your higher level classes that are more geared towards whatever subject you're learning,
Mm-hmm.
extremely important.
All right, I can't emphasize how correct that is enough because when I applied for my master's, I applied to 2 colleges. One of them had no clue who I was. Well, how do I phrase this? I had attended that university prior, but I was not attending for that field of study. I was doing something else. So I basically knew nobody there. I actually had to go and talk to, and I talk about this in the book. Um, excuse me. I had to go talk to, I think, the admissions counselor for that specific master's program and say, hey, this is what I want to do. This is my background, yada, yada, yada. I then applied for the school that I met you, where I would eventually get my master's. And I applied, no interview, no nothing, and I got approved almost immediately.
Nice.
I got the acceptance that I said, hey, you're going to be in this, and you're accepting the master's program if you want to accept it, like within a day or two.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, like at this point in my junior and senior year, I was taking way more specialized classes, so I was interacting with the same professors more and more, and so I would visit them more often and during their office hours. I guarantee you that had an impact. I guarantee you that had an impact, and then be like, oh yeah, we know him. He's good. He has his grades. Yep. Let's get him in. Guarantee you. But,
yeah.
But what other experiences have you noticed by benefits from visiting the professor?
I mean, that is mainly the big one. The other ones obviously are helping on the exam because the professor is the one making the exam.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
if it's a good professor.
Mm-hmm.
But that and the direct instruction on how to, depending on the class, of course, but they'll explain to you how to do things and help you understand in a way that more fits you.
Yes.
Because especially if you're special needs, if you're on the autism spectrum, especially if you're not getting social security benefits at all and you're not in a special autism program, you're just a normal individual who has Asperger's or low level autism.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the perfect thing, is going to the professor, getting that individualized explanation for how to do things, the direction and instruction. Because if you're not getting that in the classroom setting, the one that's generalized for everyone, you need to talk to the professor to get that personally.
Yes, I want to provide 3 examples. One was, so I had to take a political philosophy class in the college I went to. Not the one I mentioned you on,
Yeah.
but the one funny enough, this is the school I did apply for my master's program. But I had to take a political philosophy class, and we had to write an essay, I believe, but we had we were given a list of topics to talk about. It was political philosophy, so Thomas Hobbes, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I didn't mind because the professor was really good at explaining things.
Oh,
So
that's
I
good.
was like, okay, yeah, sign me up for this. But I picked my subject for the essay, and I had to submit it. But I thought I understood it, but once I actually started to read more and more of it to prep for the essay, it turns out, I did not. So I was like, I have to go see the professor. And so he did. And so I went and saw the professor, and I was like, "Hey, professor, I'm reading the material, but I'm not quite getting anything from it. Could
clicking.
It's not clicking. Could you please elaborate it?" And did. Right then, he was like, "Okay, so when you read this, what he's trying to say is, blah 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 and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" And he said, "Oh, well, this means blah blah blah." Again, it's the one-on-one instruction. Another example. That's political philosophy. Here's a math example. I had to take both this example and the next one are both going to be statistics classes, but point stands. My undergraduate statistics class, I was struggling with an assignment, and I went to the professor, and he had a whiteboard in his room, and he just drew it out for me. He's like, "Okay, so this problem is the blah 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 blah, which means you have to do this." And it's like, "Oh, you have to," and then it clicked, like, "Oh, you have to do that when you see that in this problem." He's like, "Yeah, you have to do this and this." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it makes so much more sense now." And yeah, and here's the thing: professors are there to help you. Like, if you approach them and you're making the effort, they will help you.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. If they're not, then go to the TA, go to your classmates, and if they're not going to help either, go to the dean.
Yeah, at that point, there's something wrong. If your TA, your classmates, and your professor can't help you, there's something wrong. Like,
Yes.
it's a class, not with you.
Oh,
That's a structural problem that needs to be talked with someone higher up.
Oh, and then it just dawned on me. I thought of another example while discussing this. Another example. So, professors have TAs, and sometimes there are miscommunications between the professors and the TAs. I took a real estate class at the college where I met you, undergraduate. It was an elective that my counselor, not like academic counselor, it was a class that my academic counselor recommended I take. Never listened to her again. This was horrible. But I went to the professor and I said, I had to go. I wanted to go through with him. It's like, hey, what do I need to make to pass the class? Because I'm really struggling here. And then he gave me my exams, and we went over. It's like, okay, so you got this there and this there, and then the professor looked at the grades on my graded exams and looked at his grade book and thought, something's not right here. That should say a 66. Like, in my system, it says it's a 60, but this paper says there's a 66. That's not correct. Now, bear in mind, a 66 is still failing.
Not great, but that's better than a 60. Yeah.
Yes. So he's like, "Oh my gosh, the professor said to me, and I quote, I have never had this happen before."
Oh, yeah. I've never heard of this happening before.
So yeah, so sometimes there are disconnects between the TAs and the professor, and so spoilers, I still ended up getting a D in the class, but I didn't fail. And so those points mattered. Damn it. And then another subject of the TAs, this is for my graduate level statistics course. In this instance, the TA graded the exams. And so in this class, the exam was we had to solve a complex a complex equation. Then we had to write essentially a narrative about it. I was like, oh, when we did this, we found out this, and this, when we found out this, we found out this. My grade on the narrative was low, and I thought that's strange because, not to toot my own horn, but I think to myself as a pretty competent writer.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the.
I heard you wrote a book.
You know what I did? I did. Thanks for pointing that out. It's on Amazon right now. Growing Up with Asperger's: Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom. But I went to the professor, and I very politely asked him. I was like, "Hey, I have some questions about my grade on the exam, specifically on the narrative, because I thought it wasn't that bad." And then the professor brought up the computer, he looked it over, said, "Yeah, this is better than what the TA gave you credit for. I'm going to give you more points." Right then and there, he improved
that's simple. Yeah.
Right then and there, he improved my test grade. And by the way, this on this midterm. Oh my God, everyone except one person failed.
Oh,
So
wow.
everyone else was going to get a grade boost, but I got not a bigger grade boost, but a few points. So that helps. It can improve your grade if you. Now, granted, this is in a class by class, professor by professor basis, but it can help you. I did not go into the meeting with this graduate level statistics professor expecting thinking that I was going to get more points on my final. I was not expecting to be bumped up from like a C to a C plus, or a D to a D plus. I don't remember what it was.
That's the thing. I feel like the majority of grading, and not the majority of grading, but the majority of the time, you get a benefit for just putting in the effort.
Yes.
Rarely are you failing a class or doing poorly in a class because you're too dumb and you can't understand the information. If you talk to the professor, if you talk to the TA, they will guide you or direct you to what you really need to learn or what you need to do and how you need to, like, what you need. So I feel like it's scary at first and it can be really easy to fall in the trap of just being lazy. But just talk to the TA, talk to the professor, talk to your peers, your classmates. They might know better than you. I had a history class where I was failing the essays and I didn't understand why, because I definitely understood the material. Turned out the TA was only grading on chronological information.
What?
So I had to write. So your essay had to make sure to include all the events covered and the dates at which they happened. Which, fun fact, is not the point of learning history. The point of learning history is to understand why the things happened and what they mean for humanity and society, which is what I was writing. My essays were very good. And then my essays became very bad. They became me listing off chronology, but I got better grades. So sometimes it's as simple as that, where it's like you're not dumb, you're not making a mistake. The teacher's not going to make fun of you. The professor isn't going to bully you. They're there to help you. They have office hours every week for a reason.
Yes. It is important to stress that like criteria may be different from professor to professor. Like you said, a different professor may want an essay that's like, hey, why did this happen? What does this mean? And then other professors are the ones like you had, where it's like, give me dates, give me locations, give me people, key figures, everything.
Yeah.
So
I feel like we strayed quite a bit from the primary topic, but how to help someone with autism and not be harmful is patience. That's the word. Being patient and being willing to explicitly explain things. And if you are an individual with autism, your job is to seek that help. If you need help, you need to be explicit. You need to be like, hey, I don't understand. I need help. Can you explain this to me?
Yes, and this applies in the workforce as well. Like, I have an example where just a few months ago, I was swamped with work due to me having to cover for someone while they were out. And I had to, and there's a project where I needed to get done, but I knew I wasn't going to get it done in time. So I just went to my supervisor and said, hey, due to reasons XYZ, can I get an extension of the project? And he said, sure.
Oh yeah,
it was that simple.
I've had to get extensions on many things in college. I've never had a professor say no. Every single time, they've always said yes.
Yes, they will help you out if you make the effort to reach out to them.
Yes.
Now, if you're on the receiving end of, let's say you are a professor and you're trying to work with an autistic student, or you're a supervisor of an autistic worker, et cetera, their tone. Try not to jump to conclusions on what their tone means, because a neutral sounding tone, it may sound neutral to you, but to them it may be like a very grateful. Their intent is grateful, but it's coming out as neutral. Or
yeah, well, especially in like a work environment.
Yes.
if your boss or your supervisor is stressed out and you ask them for help and they have a negative tone, it's probably not you. It's just that they're already stressed out.
Yes. Yes.
In general, good rule of thumb for everyone, special needs or not, is just focus on what is explicitly said and told to you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry too much about things that are background information like tone,
Yeah.
because you can misread tone very easily.
Yes. Yes, and don't be. Then if your autistic person is asking you to be direct or more clear, just please do that. Don't continue to be vague. Don't continue to.
Yes, yeah. It's difficult at times to be more explicit and clear because it feels so natural to say like, yeah, just make a sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
But you really do have to take that step back and really remember like, okay, let me break it down to even smaller, more explicit steps.
Yes, like this report is going to consist of this part, this part, this part, and this part. This is going to be the x-axis. This is going to be the y-axis. You do this, and you know how to put the things in the x and y-axes. So do it there, and then these are what I need to be on the. This is the data I need to be represented on the report and whatnot. So that's a good point. Don't be afraid to break it down further.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean it's really that and patience is really the main two things. And I guess we can get into like secondary topics of harmful and helpfulness, like autism awareness.
Yeah,
There's a lot of people who think they're helping when they're promoting autism awareness, and it's not helping; it's hurting, and vice versa.
and this is no more prevalent than on short form social media. Like
The bane of all of our existences.
Yes, like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Stories, and I know co-host extraordinaire, you have a particular beef with people that have self-diagnosed autism.
Oh gosh, yes. I'm sure we've talked about it previously, but
Let's talk about it again.
people love to make TikTok or Instagram videos being like, I have autism and this is how my autism works. And then they do something quirky and silly, and you're like, yeah, that's not autism. That's just you seeking attention. And I know that sounds harsh and judgmental. I mean, I'm sure some of these people do have autism and they're actually explaining real symptoms of their autism. But a lot of the ones I've seen are clearly people trying to exaggerate it to make it cool, quirky. I don't know. It's
They want internet points.
internet brownie points, yeah. And there's nothing really that big of a deal. It's not that big of a problem until other people watch those videos and do start to think, oh, that's what autism is. Autism is, I don't know, doing jazz hands all the time. People associate autism with stimming so hard. And it's like a lot of people with autism stim, not all of them. A lot of them don't.
Yeah, I don't stem.
Yeah.
I've never had the need to stem, and which was what was extremely strange is that uh, we may have discussed this on the podcast before, so I'll be brief. There's this dating app for autistic people. When you're setting up your profile, it asks me what's your favorite stem. I'm like, what the fuck's a stem? I don't know what a stem is. So
what's your favorite stimulation activity?
I don't know, music, certain orchestral music.
Yeah, but I'm sure they meant like, do you clap your hands or wiggle your fingers or scratch your eyeball?
I'd have to
maybe not that last one.
That would actually be a good podcast episode where we live set up a profile for an autistic person on this autistic dating app to see, okay, here's where we think it gets right, or sometimes this is where it gets wrong.
That's a good idea. I would love to go through, because like there's a lot of apps and just websites and informationals, even from professionals like Autism Speaks, cough, cough, that have information about autism, and then you read it as someone who works in the field and you're like, that's just wrong. That's I'm sure we brought it up before, but for a long time people stopped people with autism from stimming just entirely, and that's bad. Don't do that. Unless the stimming is causing physical danger or harm to anyone around, it's fine, let him stim. Stopping that just causes a lot of anxiety and emotional problems. It's an inborn biological thing.
And on top of that, you're trying to bottle up something, and when you bottle up, it's going to come out at some point in a way worse way.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but yeah, when it comes to spreading awareness of autism, make sure you actually know autism and you're not just spreading misinformation. Even if your child has autism, which is one I've had to go over with parents many times, your kid has this autistic symptom or this symptom of autism does not mean every kid with autism has this symptom.
Yes.
OCD is one of the ones that makes me want to throttle people. Every parent I've ever met with a kid with autism thinks their kid has OCD too. And I have to be like, no, 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 no. OCD's like OCD and autism are comorbidities. They tend to happen together a lot. But to say that like every person with autism is also OCD is insane.
Yeah, like
It is there is a level to OCD. Wanting things to be the way you like them is not OCD.
yeah. If there's one thing I got to give my parents credit for is that they let me organize my space in the house I grew up in. They're like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, you can organize it. Like they wanted things I wanted things to be in a certain way for whatever reason I concocted in my head. And so my parents were like, all right, cool. Yeah, it's clean, it's whatnot, that's fine.
Yeah.
But they whenever they moved something, they would always let me know. It's like, hey, I had to move this because I needed to get to this, or I needed to look at this for something,
Mm-hmm.
or and if they wanted to surprise me with something, they'd be like, and I would say, hey, mom, dad, did you move something? No, why? It's like because something's missing, something's moved, and of course they'd be like, oh, hey, surprise, we took this thing that's in your room and it made it into this
So,
thing.
did you know that what had specifically moved, or was it just a general feeling that something was like different?
Both.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sometimes they're like, I know this is gone. I don't know why it's gone, or at least my parents wouldn't
And
tell me
and
that it
how would
was.
you feel about that? Like, how did it make you feel at the time?
Um.
Because that's really the differentiation between like just preference and OCD.
Mhm.
A preference is I want my bookshelf organized. It's disorganized. That annoys me. I'm going to reorganize it. OCD is someone moved a book off my bookshelf or it's disorganized. I'm having a panic attack.
Well,
That's the
it's
difference. Is one is a compulsion to fix it at the like detriment to your emotional mental health, and the other one is just like I'm kind of annoyed.
I was definitely kind of annoyed,
Yeah,
like because I didn't know where it was or why it was gone and whatnot. That annoyed me. But like when I went to school, I didn't like when I went to school when I was like, all right, whatever, I'm focused on this now.
yeah,
It's definitely not an emotional thing. I definitely never had any panic attacks. It definitely wasn't a
yeah,
compulsion.
yeah.
Definitely
That's
not
that's
that.
definitely the difference. Is compulsion. Where it's like it will ruin your day and everything you're doing until you fix the problem.
Yes. So yeah, that was never a problem with me. It just, so I liked, even my girlfriend right now says, oh yeah, you like things the way they are. I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have a client who he likes to fold towel. He one of his chores is to fold towels and put them in the drawer, and
mm,
he likes to shove them in the drawer as far back as possible, essentially unfolding all the towels he just spent like an hour folding.
really?
And his parents were both like, "Oh yeah, that's one of his OCD things. He always does that." And I was like, "Okay, well he's gonna stop doing that." And they were like, "Oh no, it's OCD. He can't stop." And I was like, "No, no, he doesn't. He will stop." And then literally 1 week later, it was only a week, 2 therapy sessions later, he was just placing them flat inside the drawer and closing the drawer. Because all it took was me explaining to him, like, you're unfolding everything you folded. Don't you think that's a waste of time? Just put it flat in the drawer. There's plenty of room. And that's it. That was it. Turned out it wasn't like an OCD thing. I think someone taught him to shove them in there to get them all to fit, and he just thought that's how you're supposed to do it every single time.
Yeah, that. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that. Hey, that's how it's supposed to be done, or at least they think or perceive that's how it's supposed to be done. But
Yes.
you provided him with a very logical explanation of, hey, isn't this undoing everything you've just done? Wouldn't it be better if you
You
did
did
it
it
like
this way?
this? And then they
Yes.
did it like this, and I assume it works.
That's a thing I have to deal with a lot of clients. They are taught either by a bad therapist or by a parent who doesn't know what they're doing or just someone in general how to do stuff, and they're taught in a way that puts these deep-seated habits, and they continue to do it wrong over and over because they've been taught that's the way to do it, or they've misattributed something as being an important factor. Like
Okay.
I'm sure he shoved those towels in there the first time because there wasn't enough room for all the towels, and that was the only way to get them to fit. But then he thought that's just what you do every time.
Yep. So let's dig deeper into that. How would you, if you put yourself in the shoes of a parent or a supervisor or a teacher or a whatever, and you're like, hey, autistic person, I think it'd be better if instead of doing this, you did this. How would you recommend that person go about doing that?
Kind of the same way I just explained. Really, just sitting down with the person and explaining it to them, and
Mm-hmm.
then showing them how to do it correctly. A lot of the times, the issue comes from two things. One, shaping is a great way to teach anyone anything.
Shaping.
Shaping is when you teach someone how to do something in steps. So,
Mm-hmm.
folding towels example. Getting the towels out of the basket and putting them on your bed and folding them. That's step one.
Mm-hmm.
After that, they can mess everything up, but they've learned step one.
Okay.
And then step two is taking the towels to the drawer and they're putting in the drawer. That's step two. They did it. Even if they shoved them all in the back and unfold them, they got step two. Then step three is showing them how to put them flat in the drawer. So that's shaping is teaching a behavior in steps.
Okay.
So like approximations until you're at the behavior. So that's how most things are taught in life, but they're taught differently. What I find is oftentimes that someone will be teaching a person with autism how to do something, and they'll get to a point where they're like, "Oh, that's good enough." It's not. If it's not correct, it's not good enough. Like some things can be good enough. Most things should not be stopped at good enough, because then they're going to think that's just how you're supposed to do it. You have to teach them all the way to the end, so they're doing it correctly. Tying shoes is one that's common, actually. A lot of my clients know how to tie their shoes, but they tie these I think they're called granny knots, where you just tie random knots that don't really have any form or factor.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go to untie the shoe, you can't, because it's like a bunch of 25 random knots.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, someone taught them to tie their shoe and they got a knot. That's good enough. The shoe won't come off. True, but then that leads to problems down the line for other things.
Yeah.
Taking the shoes off, untying the shoe, or just damaging the shoelace over time.
Yeah.
So then that's when I have to be like, okay, well, I don't know who taught you how to do it this way, but you need to do it this way and tie it in the standard bunny ear shoe knot.
Yeah.
So the primary thing is just making sure that you're taking your time, being explicit, being patient, and making sure you're going from beginning to end in the correct way. No shortcuts, no good enough.
Yeah, and then
because people with autism especially aren't going to go from good enough to the actual right way to do it, because no one taught them that.
Yes, and then if you are on the opposite end and you need explicit instructions, and if you're having a problem with something, this is something that I struggle with, and that's be very, be crystal clear about what your problem is. Like narrow it down to the step, even if you have to, because there'll be instances where I'll ask hey person, I'm having trouble with this. Okay, so where do you get wrong? And then I'm like, then I have to think about it on the spot. And then it puts me in a position where I say, I'm having trouble with this. But in my head, I'm like, well, that's not entirely true. Well, that's partly true. Like I am trouble with this, but I'm also having trouble with this because of reasons X, Y, Z. But now, but the person just heard, part A, so they're only going to respond to part A. But I'm still having problems with parts B and C. So think before you speak, because I'm very quick on the draw when it comes to responding to follow-up questions, as opposed to just thinking about how I need to respond to get the answer I need, and then asking the question.
And it's easy. And when you don't understand something or having trouble, it's easy to waterfall, where you just spill out all the problems you're having at once.
Yes.
And then the person you're talking to can only really respond to whichever problem they pick.
Yes.
And then all the other problems get unsolved.
Yep.
Don't get solved.
Yep.
So you got to really focus on individual things and work your way through it.
Yes. Very true.
I'm trying to think if there's any more explicit instruction. I can give examples of things. I go to the grocery store with my clients, and I have clients that are very high functioning and know how to buy their own groceries, but they come to this one problem that has reoccurred. They don't know the right produce to buy. So you'll tell them to get tomatoes, and they'll buy tomatoes, but they won't check if the tomatoes are rotten or bruised or moldy. And that's something that, normal people forget all the time, but it's something that individuals with autism may never even think about checking. So I remember I had a client where he, in all ways, he seemed like a normal 20-year-old adult. So we go to the store, we start buying groceries, and I noticed the apples he grabbed are just bruised. And he bought the bag of apples, and the apples he bought had been thrown against a wall or something. They were not great looking. So I stopped and was like, hey, these apples don't look good. He's like, no, they're in the bag. And I was like, no. They're all bruised and messed up. And he just didn't think about it. He was like, oh, yeah, I always thought they would just bruise after I bought them, and then I would throw them away. And I'm like, no, you're buying them already messed up. So we went back to the area where you buy the bags, and I had to go through and be like, okay, so look at each apple in general. See, these apples don't have bruises. Get this bag and put this one back. Just little stuff like that. Things that you kind of take for granted because you don't even really think about it can sometimes slip the mind of an individual with autism, even if they're extremely high functioning. So I've had to do that with a couple clients where I've had to go through the produce and be like, your mom told you to buy onions, but did you actually look at the onion, or did you just grab the onion from the onion section and throw it in the cart? You got to really look at it. Make sure you're not buying rotten produce.
Yes. Very important. Don't buy rotten produce.
Also, if you're a parent giving instructions to your autistic child to go buy stuff at the grocery store, write down the exact product you want them to get. Don't write onions.
Yeah.
Write yellow onion or sweet onion. Write the specific onion you want them to grab, Because I've had parents do that where they write down yogurt and they go, "Oh, you got the wrong yogurt," and it's like you didn't tell them what yogurt to buy.
Yeah, and then like even
I don't know. I'm the therapist. How am I supposed to know this?
yeah, it's like an example I would use is garbage bags. Okay, what brand? Okay, how many?
What size?
What size? Oh, that's a big one. What size? Do you want the regular? Do you want lemon scented, or do you want the odor blocking?
Mm,
Do you want what's what? How many trash cans do you want? Because the boxes come in different sizes. What's the budget and
yeah.
all that jazz? Like you have to. There are a lot of what I like to call, I guess, um, not factors, but like the bruised apples thing. It's like there's more
Yeah.
specific
There's
details.
details that an autistic individual who seems like they have done this a million times and know what they're doing may miss that a lot of people wouldn't realize.
Exactly. So.
And so you got to work from the generalization, those detail skills. Because once you teach
Yes.
those detail skills, they don't go away. I actually had the opposite problem where I had a client who was overly checking every piece of produce he was buying, and I had to be like, no, okay. This one's good. You don't have to smell every apple to find which one smells right. Just find one that doesn't smell like it's rotten and you're good.
Yeah, like
don't overdo it. But
yeah,
it takes patience and work.
Yeah. Patience and work. Don't overanalyze. So, is there anything else regarding communications on the way we've discussed it that you want to go over?
I think the main thing is just to be patient and explicit, and keep in mind details that seem so naturally normal to you might not come to the person you're talking to.
Oh, and be direct.
Yeah.
Be direct. Direct, explicit. What was the third one you said?
Just keep in mind the details
patient.
That may. Oh yeah, patient. Yeah.
Yes. And then what are we gonna say about the details?
Details that are seem obvious to you may not be obvious to the person you're talking to. So make sure they understand.
Yes, that's very true. But also make sure not to baby them, because the autistic person will just think you're being demeaning.
Yeah, you can over-explain something as long as you're not over-explaining in a rude tone.
Yes, indeed. Alrighty, well, this has been another great episode of the Sperging Out Podcast. My name is Mitch Grace. I am the author of the book Sperging Out. Not Sperging Out. That's the name of the podcast. The book is called "Growing Up with Asperger's: Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom" on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. The Audible version is coming out very soon. We'll keep you updated on that. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host extraordinaire.
Thank you. I've been happy to be on this episode.
And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.